Hello, welcome to independent and dependent clauses. We're going to talk about independent and dependent clauses because it's crucial that you understand the difference so that you can identify when you have fragments or when you have created run-on sentences. So we're going to start at the very beginning here. I want you to think about tortilla chips. So would all of you agree that you could eat tortilla chips on their own, right? They can stand on their own. We can eat them by themselves, even if it may not be the most exciting culinary experience of our lives. So yes, right? Most of us would agree you can eat tortilla chips on their own. That is like an independent clause. So an independent clause is a sentence, and it's independent because it can stand on its own, just like our tortilla chips example. So how can you identify that something is an independent clause? Well, like I said, it can stand on its own, and it also expresses a complete idea. It has a subject and a verb. If someone swung open the door and said that sentence, it would make sense to you. You might need some context, but it would make sense. So it has a subject and a verb, right? So an action word and the thing that is doing the action. And it expresses a complete thought. So for example, my friend runs 30 miles a week. Can stand on its own, expresses a complete thought, and it has a subject and a verb. So if I flung open the door and said, hey, my friend runs 30 miles a week, and I closed the door, you would know what I was talking about. It would make sense. She convinced me to start running too. Also stands on its own, expresses a complete thought, has a subject and a verb. So this is the test that I just talked about. If you walked in the door and said it and closed the door and left, would it make sense to people? So that's one way to think about complete sentences or independent clauses. So let's quiz ourselves. Every Friday, I get a coffee from Starbucks. Independent clause or not? Yes, if I flung open the door and said, every Friday I get a coffee from Starbucks, and closed the door and left, you would know what I was talking about. It expresses a complete thought, it can stand on its own, and it has a subject and a verb. I get. So getting is the action here. Who's doing the getting? I am. Here's another one. I have been going to the same Starbucks for 3 years. Again, an independent clause. It expresses a complete thought, can stand on its own, it has a subject and a verb. I, subject of the sentence, have been going, verb. When I order my drink, independent clause or not? It's not, right? It doesn't even sound complete. When I order my drink, what? If I'd opened the door and said that, when I order my drink, and then closed the door, it wouldn't make any sense, right? So it does not express a complete thought. All of the workers roll their eyes. Now that expresses a complete thought, right? And it has a subject and a verb. All roll. This of the workers here is something we call a prepositional phrase. So rolling is the verb, or roll. And who's doing the rolling? Yes, the workers are, but it's all of the workers. So it expresses a complete thought. Now ideally, we would go back and attach this dependent clause, when I order my drink, we would attach it to all of the workers roll their eyes. So we would say, when I order my drink, comma, all of the workers roll their eyes, and combine that dependent and independent clause to make a complete sentence. Always getting the same thing. Independent or not? Always getting the same thing. So if I opened the door and said, always getting the same thing, and closed it and left, you wouldn't really know what I was talking about, right? So that does not express a complete thought. It also is lacking a subject. Who is always getting the same thing? Where's the verb? So this would need to be corrected to have a subject and verb, or it would need to be attached to an independent clause somewhere. So let's talk about salsa, right? We talked about tortilla chips and how they can stand on their own. Would any of you eat salsa all by itself? So most of us would not just take the bowl and drink it, nor would we get a spoon and just shovel it in. We know that salsa needs tortilla chips, right? The salsa can't really stand on its own. It is needing something else to function. So a salsa is like a dependent clause, and a dependent clause is a fragment. Can't stand on its own, does not express a complete thought or idea. So back here, where we said, when I order my drink, that's a dependent clause or a fragment. So here's some examples of dependent clauses. While eating a sandwich, especially after midnight, although I have a big appetite. So none of those really make sense by themselves, but they could easily be attached to an independent clause. While eating a sandwich, comma, I decided I also wanted some potato chips, period. I am always hungry, especially after midnight. One sentence, right? So you get the idea. They leave you feeling like something is missing or incomplete. Chips and salsa, however, right? 2 thumbs up, we're in business now. When you start attaching dependent clauses to independent clauses, you have more complex and interesting sentences. So now it's your turn. We can attach these dependent clauses to independent clauses. We already talked about some of those examples, but let's look at this one. So is this a dependent clause or not? My husband and I drive to work together. It is not a dependent clause. It's an independent clause because it expresses a complete thought, right? Joe and Enrique drive to work together. 2 people drive to work together. It expresses a complete thought, has a subject and verb being drive. Especially when it is snowing. So again, if I opened the door and said, especially when it is snowing, and closed the door and left, would that make any sense? And it wouldn't. So we have a dependent clause. It's dependent on an independent clause to make it make sense. I always feel like I'm going to skate off the road. Dependent, independent. It's independent. So it has a subject, I, and a verb, feel, and it expresses a complete thought. So let's move through some of these here. So there's lots more examples on this PowerPoint that you can kind of test yourself with. There's also a website that has more information about independent and dependent clauses, so you're welcome to use that. And I think that is it for independent and dependent clauses. Bye.